The Fallen Idol by Graham Greene, 3. The sun poured in between the curtains and Baines was beating a tattoo on the water can. "Glory, glory," Baines said. He sat down at the end of the bed and said, "I beg to announce that Mrs. Baines is being called away. Her mother's dying. She won't be back till tomorrow." "Why did you wake me up so early?" Philip said. He watched Baines with uneasiness. He wasn't going to be drawn in. He'd learned his lesson. It wasn't right for a man of Baines's age to be so merry. It made a grown person human in the same way that you were human. For if a grown-up could behave so childishly, you were liable, too, to find yourself in their world. It was enough that it came at you in dreams. The witch at the corner, the man with a knife. So, "It's very early," he complained, even though he loved Baines, even though he couldn't help being glad that Baines was happy. He was divided by the fear and the attraction of life. "I want to make this a long day," Baines said. "This is the best time." He pulled the curtains back. "It's a bit misty. The cat's been out all night. There she is, sniffing round the area. They haven't taken in any milk at 59. Emma's shaking out the mats at 63, he said. "This was what I used to think about on the coast. Somebody shaking mats and the cat coming home. I can see it today," Baines said, "just as if I was still in Africa. Most days you don't notice what you've got. It's a good life if you don't weaken." He put a penny on the washstand. "When you're dressed, Phil, run and get a mail from the barrow at the corner. I'll be cooking the sausages." "Sausages?" "Sausages," Baines said. "We're going to celebrate today. A fair bust." He celebrated at breakfast, restless, cracking jokes, unaccountably merry and nervous. It was going to be a long, long day. He kept on coming back to that. For years he had waited for a long day. He had sweated in the damp coast heat, changed shirts, gone down with fever, lain between the blankets and sweated, all in the hope of this long day. That cat sniffling round the area, a bit of mist, the mats beaten at 63. He propped the mail in front of the coffee pot and read pieces aloud. He said, "Cora Down's been married for the 4th time. He was amused, but it wasn't his idea of a long day. His long day was the park, watching the riders in the Row, seeing Sir Arthur Stillwater pass beyond the rails. "He dined with us once in Boap, from Freetown. He was the governor there. Lunch at the corner house for Philip's sake. He'd have preferred himself a glass of stout and some oysters at the York Bar. The zoo, the long bus ride home. In the last summer light, the leaves in the Green Park were beginning to turn, and the motors nuzzled out of Berkeley Street, with the low sun gently glowing on their windscreens. Baines envied no one, not Cora Down, nor Sir Arthur Stillwater, or Lord Sandale, who came out on the steps of the Naval and Military and went back again because he hadn't got anything to do and might as well look at another paper. "I said, 'Don't let me see you touch that black again,' Baines said. Baines had led a man's life. Everyone on top of the bus pricked up their ears when he told Philip all about it. "Would you have shot him?" Philip asked, and Baines put his head back and tilted his dark and respectable manservant's hat to a better angle as the bus swerved round the artillery memorial. "I wouldn't have thought twice about it. I'd have shot to kill," he boasted, and the bowed figure went by. Steel helmet, the heavy cloak, the turned-down rifle in the folded hands. "Have you got the revolver?" "Of course I've still got it," Baines said. "Don't I need it with all the burglaries there've been?" This was the Baines whom Philip loved. Not Baines singing and carefree, but Baines responsible. Baines behind barriers, living the man's life. All the buses streamed out from Victoria like a convoy of aeroplanes to bring Baines home with honor. 40 blacks under me. And there, waiting near the area steps, was the proper conventional reward. Love at lighting up time. "It's your niece," Philip said, recognizing the white mackintosh, but not the happy, sleepy face. She frightened him like an unlucky number. He nearly told Baines what Mrs. Baines had said, but he didn't want to bother. He wanted to leave things alone. "Why, so it is," Baines said. "I shouldn't wonder if she was going to have a bite of supper with us." But he said they'd play a game, pretend they didn't know her, slip down the area steps. "And here," Baines said, "we are. Lay the table, put out the cold sausages, a bottle of beer, a bottle of ginger pop, a flagon of Harvest Burgundy. Everyone his own drink," Baines said. "Run upstairs, Phil, and see if there's been a post." Philip didn't like the empty house at dusk before the lights went on. He hurried. He wanted to be back with Baines. The hall lay there in quiet and shadow, prepared to show him something he didn't want to see. Some letters rustled down, and someone knocked. "Open in the name of the Republic!" The tumbrils rolled. The head bobbed in the bloody basket. Knock, knock, and the postman's footsteps going away. Philip gathered the letters. The slit in the door was like the grating in a jeweler's window. He remembered the policeman he had seen peer through. He had said to his nurse, "What's he doing?" And she had said, "He's seeing if everything's all right." His brain immediately filled with images of all that might be wrong. He ran to the baize door in the stairs. The girl was already there, and Baines was kissing her. She leant breathlessly against the dresser. "This is Emmy, Phil. There's a letter for you, Baines." "Emmy?" Baines said. "It's from her," but he wouldn't open it. "You bet she's coming back." "We'll have supper early," Emmy said. "She can't harm that." "You don't know her," Baines said. "Nothing's safe, damn it." He said, "I was a man once." He opened the letter. "Can I start?" Philip asked, but Baines didn't hear. He presented in his stillness and attention an example of the importance grown-up people attach to the written word. You had to write your thanks, not wait and speak them as if letters couldn't lie. But Philip knew better than that. Sprawling his thanks across a page, to Aunt Alice, who had given him a doll he was too old for. Letters could lie all right, but they made the lie permanent. They lay as evidence against you. They made you meaner than the spoken word. "She's not coming back till tomorrow night," Baines said. He opened the bottles, he pulled up the chairs, he kissed Emmy again against the dresser. "You oughtn't to," Emmy said, "with the boy here." "He's got to learn," Baines said, "like the rest of us," and he helped Philip to 3 sausages. He only took one for himself. He said he wasn't hungry. But when Emmy said she wasn't hungry either, he stood over her and made her eat. He was timid and rough with her, and made her drink the harvest burgundy because he said she needed building up. He wouldn't take no for an answer, but when he touched her, her hands were light and clumsy too. His hands were light and clumsy too, as if he were afraid to damage something delicate and didn't know how to handle anything so light. "This is better than milk and biscuits, eh?" "Yes," Philip said, but he was scared for Baines as much as himself. He couldn't help wondering at every bite, at every draught of the ginger pop, what Mrs. Baines would say if she ever learnt of this meal. He couldn't imagine it. There was a depth of bitterness and rage in Mrs. Baines you couldn't sound. He said, "She won't be coming back tonight?" But you could tell by the way they immediately understood him that she wasn't really away at all. She was there in the basement with them, driving them to longer drinks and louder talk, biding her time for the right cutting word. Baines wasn't really happy. He was only watching happiness from close to instead of from far away. "No," he said, "she'll not be back till late tomorrow." He couldn't keep his eyes off happiness. He played around as much as other men. He kept on reverting to the coast as if to excuse himself for his innocence. He wouldn't have been so innocent if he'd lived his life in London, so innocent when it came to tenderness. "If it was you, Emmy," he said, looking at the white dresser, the scrubbed chairs, "this'd be like a home." Already the room was not quite so harsh. There was a little dust in the corners. The silver needed a final polish. The morning's paper lay untidily on a chair. "You'd better go to bed, Phil. It's been a long day." They didn't leave him to find his own way through the dark, shrouded house. They went with him, turning on lights, touching each other's fingers on the switches. Floor after floor, they drove the night back. They spoke softly among the covered chairs. They watched him undress. They didn't make him wash or clean his teeth. They saw him into bed and lit the nightlight and left his door ajar. He could hear their voices on the stairs, friendly like the guests he heard at dinner parties when they moved down to the hall, saying good night. They belonged. Wherever they were, they made a home. He heard a door open and a clock strike. He heard their voices for a long while, so that he felt they were not far away and he was safe. The voices didn't dwindle, they simply went out, and he could be sure that they were still somewhere not far from him, silent together in one of the many empty rooms, growing sleepy together, as he grew sleepy after the long day. He just had time to sigh faintly with satisfaction, because this too, perhaps, had been life. Before he slept, and the inevitable terrors of sleep came round him. A man with a tricolour hat beat the door around His Majesty's service. A bleeding head lay on the kitchen table in a basket, and the Siberian wolves crept closer. He was bound hand and foot and couldn't move. They leapt around him, breathing heavily. He opened his eyes and saw Mrs. Baines was there, her grey, untidy hair in threads over his face, her black hat askew. A loose hairpin fell on the pillow, and one musty thread brushed his mouth. "Where are they?" she whispered. "Where are they?" And that is the end of the third part.